what Jackie is advocating here. Her policy would mean that the European Union would give Britain the worst possible deal, obviously, in the hope that the British people would then reject it in a subsequent referendum. So actually, the Liberal Democrat proposal guarantees the worst possible outcome for Britain. We should now be uniting behind Britain's national interests, leaving the EU but not leaving Europe, rejoining the Commonwealth, rejoining the world. The world can be our oyster, the Commonwealth, the core, the pearl in the middle of that oyster. That's what I stand for. I stood for it in the referendum in 1975 when I campaigned with Tony Benn and Michael Foot as a junior foot soldier in that campaign, and I did so again in the referendum last year.
Jess Mayo, your party also, like the Liberal Democrats, is offering a second referendum. Do you deny the right of the British people who made a decision to leave the European Union, and yet you're still ignoring that result?
Well, I think that if the result was different and it wasn't so close together, then you could have that argument. But considering how close together the actual figures were, and also that it's now come out how many lies were actually told, and what's really important as well is that you wouldn't take a phone contract and then expect to take it out and then without seeing it. And this is what we're saying. We're saying let's have a look at the contract, because there are so many important laws that we have invested. I mean, it's very important that we look after our environment for our future generations. I do take my job as being a mother very seriously, and having a world in which I want to see my children play in, where they're not covered in smog, is very important, and we need to protect those.
Afzal Khan, you're part of the establishment, you're part of the European Parliament. Do you regret what's happened to the UK in terms of Brexit?
What do you mean I'm part of the establishment, first of all? I'm
elected.
I'm elected, okay.
You're elected,
I'm
you're elected to the European
people
Parliament.
of Northwest has put me there,
yeah,
okay?
But you're elected by the people in the European Parliament, in an
yeah.
institution that seems to have failed. That's what the British people have said.
Well, look, I'm also a Democrat. I'm a Remainer. I fought to make sure that we get the result which would be to remain. But the people of Britain have actually voted for us to leave, and that's the Brexit. I mean, I find it strange. George wants to hold Lib Dems for this disaster, and doesn't want to take accountability for himself, because he is the one who actually campaigned for Brexit.
And the British agreed with me.
George,
and the British people agreed with me.
George. I listened to what you said.
Yeah, but I didn't attack you. You're now attacking me.
You are.
So
You just
I'm answering.
You attacked Lib
I'm
Dems.
answering.
Yeah, you attacked Lib Dems. And what I'm saying is, the point I'm making is that actually we should take responsibility.
That's not what your notes say. Your notes didn't tell you to say that.
I don't care what my notes say. Look, listen to what I'm saying. You listen to what I'm saying. Don't worry about my notes.
I'm reading it on your notes,
well,
just like you are.
No.
Gentlemen.
No, I'm not. My notes doesn't say that.
Afzal Khan, so
the point ultimately is, look, we accept.
What's Jeremy Corbyn's position when it comes to Brexit?
Well, it's not a question of Jeremy Corbyn, it's Labour Party.
Okay.
Yeah? And Labour Party has made it clear, and that is the 6 points which George is really referring to the North. We've got clear 6 red lines. These are things.
But you don't support a second referendum?
Sorry?
You don't support a second referendum?
Well, for me, the question is, we need to go through this negotiation, see what the deal is all about. I'm pleased that the Court of Appeal has actually made sure that the Brexit goes through the Parliament. So when it gets back to the Parliament, we need to have a debate on this and then see what is the best way forward. And it may well be at that stage that the Parliament thinks, but maybe we should go back to the country, and that may be a referendum. Whatever the Parliament then decides, I'm quite happy to accept that and quite happy to promote that.
Okay, let's go to Manchester. Your lines are now open. 01254 695 607 is our number. Let's go to Manchester and talk to David. Good evening, David.
Hello, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. What would you like to question?
Well, I'd like to ask, do I direct it to somebody specifically?
Whoever you would like.
I'll direct this one at George. I'd say, George, with 82% of people, by ONS statistics, accessing the internet on a daily basis, wouldn't it be better to run a democracy by allowing our communities to vote online on what our MPs do?
Well, you're standing in this election as a candidate, and you're putting that proposal forward. Let's see, David, in Manchester, how many people vote for it.
Well, George, I'm saying because you'll probably be elected on a... sorry, George, just hold on.
No, I'm
you'll
just
probably, maximum majority you'll be elected on is probably 45%. So you're going to take on 55% of the community with everything you do.
No, but look...
well, thank you, David, for your comment. George?
David's manifesto is clear enough, and heaven knows the rest of us here had to listen to it ad nauseum on other occasions. And he's putting it before the people, and we'll see how many people vote for it. But I think there's a great case to be made for much more democratic reform in this country. There should be proportional representation, for a start, to deal with one of the points that he's made. And I've supported that all of my life, even when I would not have been the beneficiary of it. And I said to both Tony Blair and Gordon Brown that if they introduced proportional representation when they could, the Tories would never be back in power again, ever.
Okay. Let me just ask you, if you opposed Scottish independence and passionately you were out there campaigning against that, do you think it's more likely to happen now because of Brexit?
Don't. Not only don't I, Nicola Sturgeon just said today that the Indy Ref 2 might not now happen because the case to leave Liverpool and join Latvia, to leave a democratic union in this island and join an undemocratic one in Europe, to leave the pound and adopt the euro and pay the price of adopting the euro, the convergence criterion which would wipe out the public sector in Scotland, it's way, way, way too big an ask. She would never have won it, and I don't believe she'll ever hold it.
Jess, how would the Greens approach this debate, the negotiations with the European Union? What would you be different? Because the Conservative Party, who, I'm sorry, I should have said this at the beginning of the programme, we invited the Conservative Party to come along and send their candidate, and they didn't respond. We invited them to send even a statement, and they didn't respond. So I'll try throughout the debate to give you what the Conservative response is. Let's just take a quick call from Manchester. Siddiq is there. Assalamu alaikum, Siddiq. Siddiq.
Hello, I just wanted to ask a question for all the candidates. What can they do for the Manchester Gorton, because we're facing big problems, of housing and poverty, and some people in the election are standing for their own interests. Like I wanted to ask George Galloway, what did he do in Bradford for the people there? And if he's not representing any party, how can he bring forward the interests of a community? Okay,
well, if you keep watching us, the last segment of this debate is about Gorton and regeneration, and we'll pick that question up during that. Sorry, Jess, how would you approach this? How would the Green Party approach these negotiations?
I think one of the things that we identified is that we do need to have reform, because there's lots of ways that Europe can be very useful. I mean, we see this time and time again, which is run through commercial interest, where what we want scientists to share best practice, because it makes no sense for scientists to work individually and then rack up also to be funded and then to keep their results. We need to share this, and we need to all be aspiring to be the best humans that we can be. And Europe offers us the opportunity to do that. So we need to kind of hold on to that, and all of the work that has already been done that is positive, we really need to grasp that. The things that are not so useful, we can let those go and reform within it. But Manchester Gorton has benefited a lot from the European Union, and I personally have benefited a lot just from being able to have free travel. This is very important for our future generations. The idea of bringing in border controls in such a heavy way is only going to fuel further race hate, which we've already seen rise since the Brexit referendum happened, and we need to move away from that.
Jackie Pearcey, how will the Liberal Democrats approach these negotiations?
Well, I mean, the fact is, we would have to actually get the best possible deal. I mean, I would point out when we talk about
so many times from slogans from politicians. What does that actually mean?
But when we talk about it, well, we need to guarantee certain things. First and foremost, there are a lot of people living, my friends, my neighbours, who are European citizens. And we should be guaranteeing their rights as a matter of basic human decency. We ought to be making sure that the next generation have the same opportunities I had. When I was 18, I took a year out before I went to university and spent 6 months working in the south of France as a courier on a campsite. that is an opportunity that taught me a lot. And I want future generations to have these opportunities.
So you're in favour of the single market,
Oh,
the customs union,
yes,
free movement of people,
absolutely,
regardless of what the referendum result was?
Because these things, well, the Leave campaign in particular was saying that these things were not even on the ballot. But also, we need to be talking about cross-border cooperation. Issues like climate change, they're international. One country alone cannot fight climate change. And what's happening already is a brain drain in our universities, some climate scientists and others who are starting to look elsewhere than Britain for doing the vital research. And also, when we look across Europe, there are things like animal rights legislations on our farms, which actually owe a great deal to being able to enforce these standards across the whole of Europe.
Hasn't the Prime Minister said that the Great Repeal Act will transfer all those legislation, all that law, into British law?
Yes, but then as soon as we start negotiating, say, with the United States, they have practices on food that we find quite abhorrent, you know, the chlorinated chicken and quite a lot of the genetic modified stuff. Now, if we're going to then do a deal with America, we might find that this government, particularly this government, might well not stick to a lot of the standards that we've spent years trying to develop.
Okay, well, let's go to Manchester. Manchester seems to be awake tonight. Shane is there. Good evening, Shane.
Hi, it's Shen, by the way, not
Shen.
Shane.
I apologise. Shen, how are you, sir?
I'm not too bad. I've just got I've got a question I'd like to answer.
Okay, go ahead.
And one I'd like to ask, if that's okay.
Sorry?
I've got a question from your previous card. I can just answer. And
Okay,
I've got
go
a
ahead.
question for Afzal.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so the first answer was a previous caller said, what did George do in Bradford? Well, I know for a fact that Britain First and EDL were in mosques all over Bradford, and George was throwing them out, and he really stuck up for our community, our people, on his own, with his bare hands. So I've got to take my hat off for there. I'm Shen. I've seen him many times do that. He's a hero for doing that.
Okay, and your question?
Yeah, my question is, it's to Afzal Khan. When are we actually going to see you not reading from notes and actually and actually know what you're talking about, rather than just keep looking at your notes and boasting about all the qualifications you've got? Because we always keep hearing what you've done in your life, not the actions you're going to do for the people of Gorton. I'd like to know when you're going to actually stop telling us what a great person you are and do something for the good of the community. As an MEP, what have you done? Because I don't know what you've done.
Well, Shen, thank you so much for that question to Afzal Khan. I give you the right to respond to that.
Well, I will reply to that, but let me go back to the discussion which we were having just before in the negotiation, because I think that is absolutely the most important decision we're going to make in our lifetime.
Sorry, just for our viewers' sake, you've spent the last 3 years in the European Parliament. You know the personalities, you know the Commission, you know the European Council, and you know your parliamentary colleagues in the European Parliament. How would the Labour Party approach these negotiations?
Well, that's why I'm saying this is probably the most important thing we need to be making sure we get it right. Not only the future of us, we're talking here, and it's also the future of many generations to come, that we make sure we get that right. So for me, we need to make sure that the approach we have is a strong and is a collaborative relationship with the European Union. Second thing is, I want to make sure that we should have access to the single market. That is important because 50% almost of our trade is linked to the European Union. Millions of jobs are linked to that.
But the European Commission has said if you want access to the single market, you have to agree to the principles of free movement of people. And the Prime Minister and the government has said the Brexit referendum outcome was that we want to see an end to free movement of people.
Yes. So what I would be interested in is negotiating a fair management of immigration, which is in the interest of our economy. I would also be interested in making sure we defend the rights and the protection that we have. And I would want to make sure with the national security and our capacity to tackle cross-border crime, which is also preserved. And also one more important thing for me is, whilst being in part of the European Union, Northwest was the beneficiary of this relationship. So I don't want to see our region actually losing out of coming out. So to make sure we get those protections as well. And the point which is even more important than this as well, looking ahead, is there are two key other areas. There are 26 different agencies which we share to make sure that things move much more effectively for us, we need to be part of those. We need to negotiate about those as well. And that includes even the airspace, the aeroplanes and everything that moves. That's example one which we need to have a control.
You're talking about Europol and...
all those are different agencies.